Burniston, and I've got a tutorial today using your Stampin' Up! Pop and Cuts base die a little bit differently to make a fun little flipping label card. And I am going to use the Stampin' Up! Label Framelits set for this card. Start by die cutting a Pop and Cuts base card and then just score it for folding at 5.5 inches from the straight end. And then you can put the little tabs in the tuck slots and then just reinforce the fold with a bone folder. Now I'm going to switch to the framelits. So I want to put my cutting pad up on top of all my flip tabs closed, and then I think I'll just use the edge of the platform to make sure that my card is straight, and I'll even use some removable Scotch tape just to hold that on the platform so that it stays nice and straight. And then I'm going to choose the middle two framelits from the labels set, and then I just want those nest those together on the front of the card, and again I can use some tape to hold that on the card. I'll use a pencil and a ruler to make a little line in the center of my framelits, and then I'm going to come off that line in both directions so that I end up with about 1/2 inch in between the outer two lines. Those lines represent the area that I want to stay connected. So if I'm going to put my cutting pad, my top one, up to the first line, and then I'm going to run that through the Big Shot machine, that's only going to put pressure against the framelit that's underneath that top cutting pad. Everything else won't cut at all. Then I can flip my whole platform around and do the same thing on the other side of the framelit set. So I'm going to put my cutting pad right up to that outer line and then roll it right back through the Big Shot machine. What that does is it just leaves that little area between the lines. It never was under the cutting pad, and so it never got any pressure and it didn't cut at all. I can now remove that removable tape. I'll just do that pretty slowly so that it doesn't tear the paper. And then now the framelits can pop right off of there, and you'll see that that little river in the middle has stayed connected. Now just make sure that the framelits cut through both layers, which usually is not a problem with Whisper White. And now I'll use a ruler and a cutting mat and a craft knife to cut now the outer frame area away so that the only thing that's left then between connecting that inner frame to the card itself is those two little rivers, top and bottom. And you might just have to use a couple passes with your knife to get those all out of there. Now switch to a scoring tool, and what you want is a score line right up the middle of that little river. So just use the ruler, give it a good little score. And then you're going to take a craft knife, and what you want to do is you want to cut up to that score line. So basically halfway through the river connected to the inner frames, top and bottom, and then switch and cut halfway through that river out to that center score on the outer frames and do that top and bottom. And you're trying to go through both layers. Then what that'll allow you to do is you can actually fold now those little river pieces right up the middle, and one half is going to stay connected to the inner frame and cause it to flip over, and then the other half is going to stay connected to the outer card. It's also not a bad idea while you're in the business of folding just to go ahead and train that fold to work in both directions. So I'll just take my thumbnails in there and work that fold carefully to go the other way as well. And that way that frame can go in either direction is already trained. Once I've trained the fold, then I can lay the card back down flat again. And now I basically want a hinge between my front and my back little frame. And I'm going to use this paper tape, but you could use regular tape, you could use a cardstock hinge, it doesn't really matter. I figured out that I need about 9 of those little doilies to be able to do front and back and hinge it in the middle. So I'm not even going to worry about my pencil lines because my pencil lines are going to get covered, I know, by my decorations later. So I'm just going to leave the pencil lines on there. And in this case, I'll just make sure one of the doilies is kind of half on the right side of that frame. And then I'll just press it so that it goes up and over the top and then down the back side of the frame. So once your hinge is on connecting your two inner frames together, then now your card, essentially, as far as the mechanism goes, is done. You can take your little tuck slots out and open up the card, and you'll see what happens. Those two little frames are now hinged together, and they will flip and make that cool little floating framelit card. So now it's time to decorate. I cut from the T for 2 paper a smaller framelit that will fit on the front, and you see how it covered all my pencil lines. That's why I didn't worry too much about erasing them, although I could have. And then I'll use some tape runner on the back and also decorate the other frame. So now you can see what happens when I open that. I wanted to use the dress form from the Dress Up Framelits, and so I've chosen the T for 2 paper that has just mostly words, and then I'll use some of the Calypso Coral ink with the sponge just to add a little inking around the outside and just kind of a little bit of a colorful but distressed look. I love the tiny tags set. It's perfect just to make a little embellishment, and so I've gone ahead and stamped it there. And then I love how that lines up perfectly with the little jewelry tag punch so that I can just punch that out. And then I'll make a second tag as well. And both of those I will tie onto the dress forms with some baker's twine. And I did add a little bit of that white paper tape to each of the dress forms and kind of sponge through it with some of that Calypso Coral ink before I added these little tags. Just for a little bit of bling on my dress forms, I also thought it would be neat if they were each wearing a very cool rhinestone necklace. So I'll just arrange those into a little necklace shape. And then now, before I add these to my card, I got the idea that I would like to distinguish the front of the card from the back of the card. And my idea for doing that was to slide some scratch paper underneath the card and then cut one of the big framelits from some scratch paper and then sponge around it with some crumb cake ink. And what that'll do is it'll just leave that same shaped frame around my card, and it'll also kind of distinguish the front from the little piece at the back that's visible. I stamped the little Spoil Yourself Today greeting and then cut it with the smallest framelit. The idea with the dress forms is just to use, for the one that you put on first, just use the adhesive at the top and the bottom so that it doesn't stick to the label, because the label's going to have to swing. And then you can open it, you'll see the back of the dress form sitting through the window there. And then you can just add the other one to the inside of the card so that it lines up with that dress form and that you have a decorated one on both sides. I stamped the happy birthday greeting onto some crumb cake cardstock and then just cut it into a banner shape and added it to my other label. Now I did kind of think that the right side of the card needed a little something extra, so I decided to punch a couple 1/16 inch holes and then string some of that same color twine right through the holes and tie them in a pretty little bow. So now my card is finished. It was cut with the Poppin' Cuts base die, so it does have a built-in closure, and it is just a standard size A2 card, so it will fit in a regular envelope and mail for a single stamp. And I just think that it could be any theme. I love this technique. If you have enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you'll get a notification of any new videos that I post. And you can always get pop-up ideas on my blog, KarenBurniston.com. Thanks for watching.